In a significant shift in U.S. China trade relations, former President Donald Trump announced on May 8, 2025 that tariffs imposed on Chinese goods currently at a staggering 145% are set to be reduced. This unexpected proclamation comes as part of a broader strategy to realign economic ties between the two nations, which have been strained for several years. Trump stated, "We're going to see these tariffs come down. It's a good thing for American consumers and businesses alike," emphasizing the need for a more balanced trade approach. The announcement follows a tumultuous period in international trade characterized by retaliatory tariffs and trade wars that have had profound impacts on global markets. Many industries, particularly those reliant on imports from China, have been clamoring for relief as they navigate the challenges posed by elevated tariffs. The 145% rate had led to increased costs for consumers and a decline in sales for businesses dependent on affordable imports. These tariffs were a burden on the American economy, Trump added, hinting at a potential resurgence in U.S. manufacturing and consumer spending as a result of the impending reductions. Meanwhile, on the geopolitical front, Chinese President Xi Jinping has publicly allied with Russian President Vladimir Putin, denouncing what they describe as international bullying. In a speech delivered on the same day, Xi reiterated the need for countries to stand together against perceived Western hegemony. "We will not be intimidated," Xi declared, asserting that China and Russia are committed to mutual support amid rising tensions with the West. This partnership underscores a growing divide in global politics, as these nations position themselves against what they view as an encroaching threat to their sovereignty. As these events unfold, the implications for global trade are profound. Economists suggest that revoking high tariffs could reinvigorate supply chains that have been disrupted since the onset of the trade war. However, the underlying tensions between the U.S. and China remain a significant concern. The complexities of international diplomacy coupled with economic interdependencies make it challenging to predict the long-term effects of these tariff changes. In a somewhat paradoxical statement, Trump also remarked that ports running empty is a good thing, suggesting that the reduced shipping volumes could be a sign of a healthier economy adapting to new realities. This comment has sparked debate among industry experts, with some arguing that empty ports reflect disruptions in trade flows rather than a positive economic indicator. "It's essential to look beyond surface-level interpretations," warned a logistics analyst. "The real question is whether these changes will lead to sustainable economic growth or merely a temporary correction." As the U.S. navigates this complex landscape, the potential for future developments is vast. The reduction of tariffs could pave the way for renewed negotiations between the two powers, possibly leading to a more stable economic relationship. However, the rhetoric from both sides suggests that underlying tensions will not dissipate easily, as Trump's administration seeks to recalibrate trade policies. Xi's firm stance alongside Putin raises the stakes in an already fraught geopolitical environment. The coming months will be crucial as both nations reassess their strategies in light of shifting economic and political landscapes. While there is cautious optimism regarding the possible easing of trade tensions, the broader implications for global stability and economic health remain to be seen. As we look ahead, it is clear that these developments will shape not only U.S. China relations but also the dynamics of international trade for years to come. In recent weeks, significant developments have unfolded on the global stage, particularly concerning the dynamics between China, Russia, and the United States. The intricate interplay of diplomacy and human rights advocacy highlights the shifting landscape of international relations, power politics, and the persistent struggle for freedom. On May 8, 2025, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, where he positioned their partnership as a bulwark for global stability. This meeting preceded the 80th anniversary commemorations of the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II and underscored the growing alignment between the two nations. Following their discussions, Xi and Putin signed agreements aimed at strengthening cooperation across various sectors, including trade, energy, and artificial intelligence. During the meeting, she criticized U.S. unilateralism and called for a multipolar world, suggesting that both China and Russia see themselves as defenders against what they perceive as Western hegemony. In an article published in Russian media, she portrayed the alliance as essential in addressing contemporary challenges, asserting that unilateralism, hegemonism, bullying, and coercive practices are severely undermining our world. The symbolism of Xi's attendance at the Victory Day military parade, a display of military might, further emphasizes the strategic partnership's significance. This growing Russo-Chinese alliance is particularly noteworthy in light of the geopolitical instability exacerbated by former U.S. President Donald Trump's return to power. With the U.S. facing its own internal challenges, the cooperation between China and Russia appears to be solidifying, drawing in leaders from developing nations across Asia, Africa, and South America to bolster their stance against what they characterize as Western aggression. Concurrently, the discourse surrounding human rights and domestic dissent has gained prominence. In an opinion piece for the New York Times, Yaqi Wang, a Chinese human rights researcher based in the U.S., reflected on the importance of courage in the face of oppressive regimes, drawing from her experiences and those of activists in China. Wang argues that obedience to authority does not yield safety or benevolence, but rather perpetuates cycles of fear and repression. Wang recounts the story of Chinese writer Morong Xuezuan, who bravely returned to China to face potential arrest after his friends were detained for commemorating the Tiananmen Square protests. This act of defiance garnered significant public attention, ultimately leading to his interrogation without arrest, suggesting that boldness can sometimes deter authoritarian retaliation. Wang's insights resonate deeply in the current political climate in the U.S., where individuals and organizations are increasingly confronting governmental pressures. As Wang notes, fear is powerful, yet she urges individuals to embrace the intrinsic human desire for dignity and justice even in the face of overwhelming odds. The recent experiences of those opposing the Trump administration's policies mirror the struggles faced by activists in China, reinforcing the idea that the fight for rights and freedoms transcends borders. Looking forward, the international community may witness an intensified focus on the ideological battles between authoritarianism and democracy, particularly as countries like China and Russia seek to redefine global order in their favor. As Xi and Putin deepen their collaboration, the implications for international governance, human rights, and global stability remain profound. The narratives of resistance and courage articulated by advocates like Wang could inspire a renewed commitment to democratic principles in the face of rising authoritarianism both at home and abroad. The coming months will be critical as these dynamics unfold, shaping the future of international relations and the ongoing struggle for human rights worldwide. In a move that has sent reverberations through the global economy, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a series of steep tariffs on imports, positioning them as a strategic tool to revive American manufacturing and safeguard domestic jobs. However, this aggressive trade policy has sparked concern among economists and industry leaders who warn of potential price hikes for American consumers and broader economic repercussions. Tariffs, essentially taxes levied on goods imported from other countries, are intended to make foreign products more expensive and thus encourage consumers to purchase domestically made items. For instance, a 10% tariff on a $10 product would mean an additional $1 cost, raising the total price to $11. Companies importing goods into the U.S. must pay this tax, and many are likely to pass at least part of this cost on to consumers. As a result, American shoppers can expect to see rising prices across a range of consumer goods, from electronics to clothing. The rationale behind Trump's tariff strategy hinges on his belief that the U.S. has been taken advantage of in international trade. "We are being pillaged by foreign countries," Trump stated, asserting that these tariffs would not only protect American jobs but also stimulate investment in U.S. industries. His administration's goal is to reduce the trade deficit, which currently sees the U.S. importing significantly more from countries like China than it exports. The tariffs announced are sweeping. Beginning with a 10% tax on various Chinese imports, the tariff has escalated to as high as 145% for certain goods, including electronics and textiles. Moreover, an exemption for low-value Chinese goods was recently eliminated, further complicating the import landscape. In retaliation, China has enacted its own tariffs, resulting in a tit-for-tat escalation that some analysts fear could lead to a full-blown trade war. In addition to tariffs on China, Trump has targeted Canada and Mexico, imposing a 25% tax on imports from both countries. These measures have prompted reciprocal actions, with Canada imposing its own tariffs on U.S. vehicles. The automotive industry in particular is bracing for the impact, as many parts for cars manufactured in the U.S. cross borders multiple times before assembly. The ripple effects of these tariffs extend beyond the U.S. borders. Economists have expressed concerns that Trump's aggressive tariff policies could destabilize the global trading system, with the International Monetary Fund downgrading its global economic growth forecast for 2025 and predicting a higher likelihood of a U.S. recession. Markets have reacted negatively, with stock prices fluctuating and the U.S. dollar losing value, factors that could adversely affect pensions, jobs, and interest rates for everyday Americans. As companies like Adidas and Mattel prepare to raise prices for U.S. consumers, the tariffs could also limit the availability of certain products, as businesses may choose to import fewer foreign goods to avoid high costs. This could make the products that are available even more expensive, creating a challenging environment for consumers already contending with inflation. Looking ahead, the U.S. and the United Kingdom are rumored to be negotiating a deal that could mitigate some of these tariffs, particularly on cars and pharmaceuticals. However, experts caution that the long-term outlook remains uncertain. The infrastructure of the global trading system has been damaged, and as the U.S. economy faces potential recession, both domestic and international markets may experience turbulence. As this trade saga unfolds, the question remains: can the U.S. effectively navigate these turbulent waters, and will Trump's tariff strategy ultimately lead to the economic revival he envisions, or will it exacerbate the very issues it seeks to solve? As global leaders and economists keep a watchful eye on the situation, the implications of these policies will likely shape international relations and economic landscapes for years to come. In a dramatic escalation of tensions in South Asia, U.S. officials have reported that a Chinese-made jet from Pakistan successfully downed 2 Indian fighter aircraft. This revelation came to light on May 8, 2025, following a detailed analysis of the incident, which has significant implications for regional security dynamics and military strategy. The incident raises questions about the effectiveness of military preparedness in a region marked by long-standing hostilities. According to sources familiar with the situation, the Chinese-made jet was utilized in a recent skirmish that saw the downing of the Indian aircraft, an event that has not only ignited diplomatic tensions but also put a spotlight on the military capabilities being developed through Sino-Pakistani cooperation. The U.S. has been closely monitoring the evolving military alliances in the region, especially given China's increasing influence in South Asia. The specifics of the incident remain somewhat murky, but officials are concerned that this could signify a shift in the balance of power in favor of Pakistan, potentially emboldened by Chinese support. As this military confrontation unfolds, Taiwan is also grappling with its own political and social challenges. The Mainland Affairs Council (MAC) has recently defended its controversial decision to revoke the admission of a China-born student to the National Defense Medical Center (NDMC). The student, who grew up in Taiwan after moving from Nanjing at a young age, expressed frustration over the ruling, which cited a requirement of holding Taiwanese household registration for at least 20 years. MAC spokesperson Liang Wenqi emphasized that the regulations are designed to ensure that individuals serving in national defense roles have deep ties to Taiwan. The case has sparked widespread debate on social media and among policymakers, highlighting the complexities of Taiwan's identity politics and its relationship with mainland China. In a separate but related context, the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee has invited Microsoft President Brad Smith to advise Congress on how to outpace China in the race for artificial intelligence (AI). Despite Microsoft's historical ties to Chinese military entities and concerns over its partnerships with companies linked to the Chinese Communist Party, the committee is keen on leveraging the tech giant's expertise in AI to bolster U.S. competitiveness. Senator Ted Cruz emphasized that China is strategically prioritizing AI to enhance its national capabilities, making it imperative for the U.S. to escalate its efforts in this field. Critics, however, have voiced apprehensions about Microsoft's past collaborations and the potential risks they pose to U.S. security interests. Meanwhile, China has reacted strongly against U.S. military maneuvers in the Asia-Pacific region, labeling them as attempts to turn the area into a powder keg. A spokesperson for the Chinese Ministry of National Defense warned that U.S. actions, including plans to establish a significant military facility in the Philippines, threaten regional stability and could exacerbate tensions. Such rhetoric underscores the precarious nature of relations between the U.S. and China, especially as both nations vie for influence in a geopolitically crucial region. As these narratives unfold, the interconnectedness of military, political, and technological issues continues to shape the landscape in Asia and beyond. The implications of the downing of Indian aircraft, the rejection of the military med school applicant, and the Senate's engagement with Microsoft all point to a complex web of national interests and security concerns. Looking ahead, how these countries navigate these challenges will be pivotal in determining the stability of the region and the future of U.S.-China relations. The evolving dynamics between the United States, Russia, and China present a complex geopolitical landscape that defies simplistic categorizations. Recent discussions have highlighted the inherent challenges the U.S. faces in attempting to disentangle Russia from its growing ties with China, especially in light of the ongoing geopolitical tensions resulting from the Ukraine conflict and the broader context of U.S.-China relations. As analysts reflect on the failures of past Western strategies, most notably the concept of Wandel durch Handel, or change through trade with authoritarian regimes, a renewed focus has emerged on the prospect of engineering a second Sino-Soviet split. This idea suggests that the U.S. could regain some strategic leverage by encouraging Russia to distance itself from China. However, this vision appears overly optimistic given the realities on the ground. The relationship between Russia and China is underpinned by significant economic interdependencies. For instance, dual-use products, including essential components for Russian military capabilities, comprise two-thirds of China's exports to Russia, a figure that has surged since the start of the Ukraine invasion. In 2024 alone, bilateral trade between the two countries exceeded $80 billion, showcasing the depth of their economic ties. Furthermore, Russia's reliance on China to circumvent international sanctions complicates any efforts by the U.S. to entice Moscow away from Beijing. Moscow's interest in maintaining its strategic partnership with China, coupled with its ongoing reluctance to engage in cooperative endeavors with the West, suggests that any U.S. attempts to broker a grand bargain would likely fall short. The notion of a pivot to Asia, which has been part of U.S. strategic discourse for years, also faces scrutiny. Historical ties to Europe and a lack of a coherent strategy for Asia highlight the difficulties the U.S. would encounter in reallocating resources effectively. The Trump administration's current stance, which seems more focused on extricating itself from European commitments rather than genuinely pivoting towards Asia, further underscores the challenges of addressing the multifaceted threats posed by China. Moreover, the competition with China requires much more than simply reallocating resources from Ukraine or Europe. Analysts emphasize that a successful strategy must encompass a comprehensive vision that integrates military, economic, and diplomatic efforts. The United States cannot merely rely on its military capabilities. It must cultivate strategic alliances and engage in substantial collaborative efforts with allies to effectively counter China's regional ambitions. As President Xi Jinping and President Vladimir Putin reaffirmed their commitment to deepening bilateral ties during recent celebrations of World War II, the implications for U.S. foreign policy become stark. Their unbreakable partnership is not only a reflection of their shared history but also a strategic alignment that poses challenges for the West. X's rhetoric emphasizes a multipolar world where China and Russia assert their influence against perceived unilateralism from the U.S. and its allies. This partnership, while not without its strains, allows Russia to leverage its relationship with China as a counterbalance to Western pressure. While some observers suggest that the Chinese-Russian bond may falter over time, the current geopolitical climate indicates that both nations find mutual benefit in their collaboration. This interdependence complicates any U.S. efforts to exploit perceived rifts between the two nations. In conclusion, the U.S. faces significant obstacles in its attempts to peel Russia away from China. The intertwined economic realities and strategic necessities of both nations suggest that any future U.S. initiatives aimed at fostering a Sino-Russian split will likely prove ineffective. Instead, the U.S. must recalibrate its approach to recognize the complexities of these relationships and the need for a robust, multifaceted strategy that addresses the broader implications of a strengthened Russia-China partnership. As the geopolitical landscape continues to evolve, the U.S. will need to navigate these relationships with caution and foresight, understanding that the dynamics of great power competition are far from straightforward.